Australia's education system is failing, not just on paper, but in practice. And the fallout isn't just about lower grades. It's about broken discipline, confused identities, and an entire generation of kids being misled. In this episode of the Finance Bubble, I sit down with a fellow young man, Curtis Piper, who was a high performer at my high school. We sit down and unpack the uncomfortable truth behind the classroom collapse. We'll expose the damage caused by outcome-based education, break down how schools went from teaching maths to pushing ideology, and reveal the behavioural crisis affecting both teachers and students. From falling PISA scores and skyrocketing suspension to the disappearance of male teachers and the rise of classroom gender politics, we lay it all on the table. This is part 2 of our 12-part cultural deep dive, and we're not just pointing fingers, we're preparing to fix what's broken. Hit play and let's talk about how to rebuild our schools, our kids, and our country. Welcome back to another episode of the Finance Bible podcast. You're joined with myself, Zeke,
and your co-host, Oscar. But before we get into it, please note that nothing in this podcast should ever be considered as personal financial advice.
But if that is what you are seeking, get in touch, let us know, and we will hook you up with the correct professionals.
Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Let's get into it. And here we are. We're back for another episode. Today we're joined by Curtis Piper, as you probably would have heard in the trailer. This young man was actually one of my classmates. He was in school with me for quite a while, and he was a delight to have around the classroom. So we've got him on here today to get his opinion, and he's welcome to share. Welcome.
Wow, thank you very much for having me, Zeke. This is amazing. I'm privileged and honoured to be here with you.
Oh, the privilege is mine. Now, let's just jump straight into it. Let's skip all the semantics and the introductions and the fun.
Okay.
Ultimately, when we were in high school, you know, I obviously wasn't the most behaved man in the room.
Sure.
You, on the other hand, remained in class and you got to sort of experience the true teachings.
Yeah, that's right.
Where ultimately what you learned wasn't really up to scratch. There's certainly subjects that are good and they perform well, but there's other things that sort of don't perform so well. And that was a decade ago. Things have gotten worse since we've left school.
Yeah, and that's scary, isn't it?
Yeah, because
Don't worry.
It wasn't wonderful when we were there.
No.
There's so many things that I wish we learned that we didn't. There was many things we learned where I was like, what are we doing? Why am I here? But ultimately, we require national excellence and we're not hitting the mark anymore. We used to do pretty well education-wise back in the day. We're just on a never-ending falling trajectory, and it's terrible. And not just academically, socially, mentally, financially, everything. This is part of a 12-part series where we're going to be diving into a bunch of different issues in Australia. So you'll probably see more as we go on.
All right, amazing.
But jumping straight in, like PISA rankings, which is the Program for International Student Assessment, it's been going downhill. In 2000, we were ranked 4th in reading and 11th in math. By 2022, they've dropped pretty rapidly, 17th in reading and 29 in math.
Wow, from 4th to 17th.
Yeah, and
no way.
11th to 29th. So how that happened, I mean, there's plenty of ways to figure it out, but that is a huge drop. You've gone, 22 years is not a long amount of time in the education scheme of things. Australia's been around for a while, schools have been around for a while. What drastic changes have happened in that time to propel us to be in such a negative environment and a down pit, just falling, as I said?
Exactly.
NAPLAN, for example. Do you recall doing NAPLAN in school?
I do remember doing the NAPLAN tests.
Yes, there was multiple. And I also remember them making it not compulsory.
Yes, that's right.
I think that might have happened in primary school, actually, because people were getting stressed.
Yes.
They didn't want to do them. And, well, okay, whatever. But the last NAPLAN, 2022, that we've got statistics on publicly available, 33%, give or take, of Year 9 students did not meet the minimum literacy standard.
That is a significant number for Year 9 students.
So 1/3 of people can't meet the minimum reading capability.
Minimum reading? That's ridiculous. How is this happening?
I actually don't know the answer to that. That's what we're here to find out.
That is a jarring number and statistic to have in Australia.
Yeah, we're meant to be a good country.
One of the best in competing in the education systems.
You would assume.
That, absolutely.
I would not walk around and look at people and go, 1, 2, 3. Oh, he can't read. 1, 2, 3. He can't read.
Wow.
Like, that is that
When
is
you put it like that,
outrageous. Yeah. So every third person you walk past, I mean, that's young because it used to be better.
mhm.
You can pretty much go, probably can't read.
Mm,
So it's not good. An OECD comparison. So that's basically 38 countries that have come together, mostly like higher performing countries. You know, like UK's in there, US is in there.
mhm.
We're in there, just a bunch of countries like us. Um, we are getting outperformed by countries that have much less economic wealth than us. Like they're not as prevalent, might I say.
Mm.
So Poland, Estonia, Singapore are dominating us. Like we're
Really?
yeah, Singapore probably one of the top performers in education, and we are just not there anymore.
Well, that's really good for Singapore, but I think Australia could then learn from its neighbouring country how we could then improve our education system, surely.
Would you not do that if you were Australia?
I would.
There you go. You would sit down and you go, okay, we're failing as a nation educationally.
Hmm.
What have we got that is different to other places? And what's getting taught, what's not getting taught.
Exactly.
You'd sit down, you'd monitor their curriculum, and you'd introduce it and change it and do the same for us.
Precisely. That's exactly what we should be doing.
Well, that's the first part of it. So just a little background on what's going on. But next we move on to a bit more of interesting topics,
Nice. Okay.
which is OBE, outcome-based education, which was in place when we were in school, curriculum decline, and a little bit of ideological teaching as well, which has come into effect in recent years. Um, Predominantly since we left, that came in. I don't really recall too much of it. There's definitely some issues where we'll dive into them soon enough.
I think it was just beginning on our way out,
It
possibly.
was, yeah, absolutely. But I do remember there was a few times like we would be sat down, they'd segregate the boys and the girls. The boys would go to the big tin shed, the girls would go to the hall, and we'd get different discussions. We'd have police come in and tell us not to send nudes and that we shouldn't harass girls and stuff.
That's right. Yes, I do remember those.
It was basically, I don't know about you, but my experience was it felt like you guys are doing the wrong thing all the time.
Like I was
The
a villain.
police are here to tell you you're all naughty, stop.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
I definitely also got that vibe just from the way they were presenting it.
yeah, you just felt like you were doing the wrong thing for existing.
Yeah. I felt like I was already automatically the bad guy
Yeah.
in any situation.
Yeah, you'd been put in this category where it's like, okay, I'm in the wrong regardless.
Right.
Yeah, terrible. But there was a major shift from linear to, um, linear being exam-based learning or testing to outcome-based non-linear testing and learning. So, for example, outcome-based and non-linear would be things like English, or short answers or long form answers, as
Okay.
opposed to, or assignments, as opposed to like a test where you've got multiple choice short answers and it's answers requiring like a specific answer, as opposed to an attempt to answer a thing. So outcome based is like, did you explain your point?
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
Here's a point. Whereas back in the day, it was, this is the answer. Did you give it?
Exactly.
No,
Right.
you were wrong. So that started changing. Western Australia introduced it in the 1990s, and then it was adopted nationwide. And it's more just demonstrating silly things. Like you get vague assessment rubrics. Grade inflation occurred drastically after the introduction, and men actually started going down because men are very linear, not non-linear.
Mm.
So that's why we still dominate things like mathematics,
Yes.
because we're very like, bang, it's there. Like that is it.
The structured thinking of
Yeah,
point A to point B, and yes.
exactly. Whereas we do terrible in English because it's very wishy-washy. You know, it's a fugazi, it's a fugazi.
I hear that. Yes.
So I you like that one, do you?
What's a it's fabulous. It doesn't exist.
Bit of Wolf of Wall Street reference for anyone having a listen that doesn't know what's going on right now. But ultimately, it declined any academic competitiveness.
Right.
Like you, and on this note as well, like my little sister just finished her HSC last year, as you were probably aware. In math, they started getting assignments.
How can you make assignments for maths?
Pretty much just an exam, but they do it at home.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
I went in
interesting.
there, she was telling me she was doing a math assignment and she wanted help with a question, and I was like, "Hang on a minute, rewind. What? Retweet? What did you just say?"
What? Yeah.
And she's like, "Oh, it's an assignment," and I was like, in mathematics.
How is that
I was
possible?
like, how? Well, I used to sit there and do it in my head, and I'd get actually another thing sidetrack. Doing assignments, exams even for math when we were there was dumb because you would be 1 mark for getting the right answer and 1 mark for showing you're working out.
Mm.
And I'm the kind of person that I'm just good at math. I get an answer. I look at something, I go, bang, that's this.
Yeah.
And then it'd be like, I have to show my working out to show how I think how everyone else thinks. And I
Yeah.
couldn't do it.
Mm.
So I'd just write like the
That was an
question
interesting
again.
concept that the education system had, where you had to prove. Was it proof? As if they thought we were cheating, perhaps?
No,
Or
no, no. I think it was to see your thinking.
right.
So you had to try to show that you demonstrated the thought pattern that was
As
required to
hmm.
get the answer.
Okay.
I don't know what else it would be there
And would
for.
they mark you down? I wonder if you got to the right answer from a different form of thinking, perhaps like you gave a
As
roundabout
in,
answer.
yeah, I get what you're saying. Like, as in you get the answer, but you do it in a weird way.
Yeah.
I
Sort
don't
of.
know. I don't know if that is accepted or not. But I used to get the answer, and then I just rewrite the question. Like, if it was something like 450, dumb example, but 450 plus 25,
Yeah.
I just wrote 450 plus 25 equals 475.
Hmm.
But then it's like, but that's not good enough working out, and I would lose a grade for it.
Really?
Yeah, every
Okay.
time. Um,
Huh. That's yeah. Okay. I
yeah,
think I'm understanding where you're coming from.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you shouldn't have to think about that, and
No.
you shouldn't have to write down how you did it. It should just be that's the answer.
Mm.
And then like division, you know how they wanted you to do like you'd write the number on top, then you'd have a line, and then you'd write like another number, and
Hmm.
you'd do all these little squiggles, and you're like taking a one or plussing a one or
Oh, I
whatever.
hated that about long division.
Yeah,
Yes.
I never did that. I just did the answer,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't show that because I didn't do it,
Mm.
and I would lose a mark again. Um, yeah, but the assignments for mathematics, I just said to her like, why can't you do this exact thing but in class? And she was like, that's not what we have to do anymore.
Mm.
I was like, do you still have blackboards? She was like, yes, we do. Um, but yeah, such an interesting concept. They've pretty much completely removed all competitive environment and any like stress creator or like any pressure cooker system
Yeah.
and moved it. So, I mean,
That is fascinating how they've done that.
yeah, if
And
you
is it because have they seen someone else do that, or is Australia kind of making things up and thinking, "Wow, our kids are kind of having a bit of trouble," and they've thought, "All right, well, let's put them in their own environment and see if they do anything to improve on what they have, because it's possibly, I guess, going to help them." It doesn't sound like it is, though, does it?
no, not at all. Here, my original thought process was okay, the change from linear to non-linear was actually to boost female education because back when schools were created, obviously it was only men,
Hmm.
which we can all agree is not right. But as we went on, they ultimately noticed that females weren't doing as well as males in school.
Hmm.
When that shift from linear to non-linear happened, it sort of flipped it on its head.
So we
So,
saw lots of girls outperforming young
yes,
boys.
correct. Yeah, so girls started really dominating things like English, science. That's pretty much it. But they started doing much better as a cohort. Um, and then I think that's maybe what they're trying to do with math because men still really dominate that subject because it is very linear. So if they're bringing in the assignment like part of it,
Hmm.
then maybe that's going to help boost it. But overall, then it's like, okay, well, if you're going to go home and do it, then how do they actually know what you do and don't know?
Hmm.
Like I could have done that whole thing for my sister in 2 minutes,
Hmm.
and she would have got 100% and been on top of her class. No one would have known.
Right.
So
And instead, if you were at the doing the maths test like we did, and you, for an example, gave your answer and it was the right answer, but for some reason had to show you're working out, then how is that any better? If they're asking for working out, but they're letting them do it at home, where, for instance, you could have helped your sister, and then given her the grades that she needed for perhaps whatever degree she was going for.
yeah, pointless. And especially now, you chat GPT. Even when we were in school, there's an app you could scan a math equation to give you an answer.
That's true.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it's all stupid. It's very silly. But HSC, like mathematics, participation of it, the courses that actually included calculus back in the day were 39% in 2001, and they've now dropped to 29%. That was only in 2015. It's got worse since then, but I don't have the relevant statistic available. So in 14 years, it dropped 10%. So we're dropping things out. I don't even know what they're learning in math anymore. Like, I couldn't tell you. It's still not financial. I know that much.
Which is a huge part of our society, which is something that we should definitely
A grade stupidity.
Right.
And then if you compare that to like Singapore or Finland, so Singapore retain standard exams, so you have to do an exam, and they're one of the top performers still globally in math and science. And Finland delayed the introduction of ideological content until actual literacy was secure. So they would, instead of doing ideological content early, they would delay that. So they'd focus on getting people to a point they can read, they can do math, they can do science, and then they would introduce that at a lower level.
Rightfully so, because that's the foundation of which those literacies are built on, right?
Correct, absolutely. Whereas we get, in our current curriculum, you start getting ideological teaching in year one.
Which is just ridiculous.
I mean, well, we'll come back to that. We'll talk about it a bit more further.
Okay.
But, yeah. Then you've got, like, behavioural breakdown, and you've got a collapse of discipline. Like, even when we were in school, like, if you did something wrong, what really would happen?
That's a great question. Maybe held back in class. You missed out on 5 minutes of lunchtime or
Oh, no.
10, maybe.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's even if you got held back. Like, realistically, what's actually going to happen? Oh, Zeke, stay here for 10 minutes at lunch. No.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Like,
Yeah.
Then they'll probably tell the deputy you might get a suspension. Oh, no, I've got a 4-day holiday.
And then what? And then how's that helping? I mean, is it...
Then the only thing that you're relying on is it's like, okay, well, mum and dad are going to discipline them at home. But then if you're relying on mum and dad to discipline them, we bring in the issue of fatherless homes.
Right.
So with fatherless homes, we all know the impact that can have on a child, and ultimately the outcome is outrageous. So you've got 85% of behavioural disorders in children are traced to a fatherless home.
Wow.
So they have a 20 times higher than average chance of having a behavioural disorder if they have a fatherless home.
Wow, that's a huge stat.
And so if you get suspended, you go home, and you need to be like disciplined or told off or whatever it is, and you're from a fatherless home, which is majority of the people that are making the behavioural issues in general, then there's no discipline train. It's never ending.
Right. And I mean, I think people are attributing this sort of discipline that a father gives to toxic masculinity, maybe, which is just...
This is very correct.
Yeah. I don't think it's right. I think a man in the house is, in charge, and you should all listen to what he has to say, because he's not leading you down a path to destruction and chaos. He's trying to lead everyone into this path of, I want to say paradise perhaps, but it's definitely just the better path that the head of the household is trying to lead his family in.
Yeah, and it's like, realistically, like, even, again, I can refer it back to myself growing up. It's like, if I play it up, what's mum going to do?
Exactly.
She's going to smack me, hurt her hand, or try to use a wooden spoon and break the wooden spoon because I'm a tank. And then it's like, oh, shit, dad's home.
Yeah.
I'm in trouble now.
How good was that threat from mum?
Yeah, when your father gets home.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh.
That was her most powerful weapon she had against us as kids, was,
every time.
Don't make me get your father.
Yeah, and so like, I feel really, really bad for the mothers in this situation, because, like, what can they do?
Exactly.
Like, what authority... I don't want to say what authority do they have, because they obviously have authority, but what, like, disciplinary action can they take? And it's like, there is none. And that's why we keep getting this situation. Like, 71% of high school dropouts come from fatherless homes. Same problem. Then you got 80% of rapists with anger issues come from fatherless homes.
That's terrible.
63% of youth suicides are from fatherless homes. Like,
these are all really high statistics, the percentage-wise.
They're huge. So the number one problem really should be addressing, this is in terms of, actually, I'd put this up as probably one of the biggest issues in society in general.
I think you're right.
Would be fatherless homes.
I think you're absolutely right.
And I'd be figuring out exactly what's going on, what's causing it, how to fix it. And that's something that we will discuss in a later episode. It's one of the other ones that come up.
I can't wait to listen to that one.
Oh, it'll be good. A lot of speculation, but it'll be fun.
It will be fun.
So children growing up without fathers twice as likely to repeat a grade or to drop out of school, and they're less likely to achieve top grades. Father's presence actually drops the likeliness by 40% for them to repeat a grade and 70% for them to drop out of school. So if you've got a dad,
Mm-hmm.
you're 70% less likely to drop out of school.
That's incredible.
It's, yeah.
What is the cause of that, I wonder? I mean, honestly, like the father has that.
I think that's it. It's just discipline. And like maybe it's role model as well.
Yeah.
If you've got a father role model, especially when you're getting brought up in school where, as we said before, men are villainized to an extent.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. Then you as a boy or a man at a young age, you're like, well, I mean, if we're all scoundrels and scumbags, like, what am I going to do? I don't have a dad. You know, I've got no one to look up to. And I can picture that being a young bloke, like you'd be very like confused at what you do if you're raised with a single mum.
Mm-hmm.
You go to school, and 75% of teachers are female.
Really?
Yeah, so you're in a position where it's like, I still don't have a man to look up to.
Mm.
And then the ones that you do, they're all celebrities and the news slanders them.
Yeah.
So you're like, okay, we're all scoundrels.
Yeah, I guess we are all done for. There's no good.
Yeah, there's no, and then obviously whatever happened in that situation, your mum's not going to be very happy.
Mm-hmm.
So may badmouth the man, may be fair, but again, it's like, okay, well, men this, men that, we all suck.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like it would be very hard as a young kid growing up, even as a young girl growing up, it'd be hard
That's a great point.
because you'd be like, again, I have no father role model. I don't know how we're supposed to be treated.
Right.
Like, I don't know how we're supposed to treat men. I don't know anything. Like,
Exactly.
it's just such a weird gap to have. And divorce is on the up and up.
Mm-hmm.
It's so easy. Since they made it legal to not have an actual reason, that was a recent, not recent, but recent enough in modern history change. You used to have a reason. So like cheating, abuse, or whatever it was. Like, yeah, an actual reason to get divorced. Now you just go and you get divorced.
Wow.
It's like, oh, he called me a name, or
that's interesting.
whatever.
That kind of takes away the power of like the vows that you make.
Big time.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's virtually, again, it's wishy-washy.
Yeah. That's scary. I don't like that.
I don't like it either.
It's much better if we can treat our words as something valuable and worth.
That's what words should be. If you say something, it should be spoken into existence. It should be cement, concrete, firm. But yeah, if you grow up in the fatherless home, it's going to be tough. But then at the same time, even if you do have a father, you've got that authority figure at home and you've got that discipline. Then you go to school, you've got 75% female teachers, and you're probably going to be in a position where you're like, I can probably play up here. I can probably get away with it. And you're just waiting on that hope that they don't tell your parents so that your dad doesn't take advantage. Obviously, it'll take advantage. So that your dad doesn't discipline you.
That's right.
I don't know where I was going with that. But like if they don't make that call and then your dad doesn't know, then again, what discipline do you have?
Mm.
You might get in trouble, as you said. You might have to stay back for lunch.
Mm-hmm.
You might get a suspension, which may or may not be a reward.
Yeah.
There's nothing that can be done. And it's like, I don't know. I think respect goes a long way in school.
Absolutely.
Like there's a lot of teachers that I did respect. There's a lot that I didn't, and the ones that didn't, they knew it.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that did, they knew it. I was an angel.
Mm-hmm.
I was like the kids from Cat in the Hat.
Yeah,
angels. If you've watched that recently, it's a great reference. It's true.
Is it the nanny?
Yeah, the nanny. She's like, she wakes up on the couch and she gets a phone call from the mom. She's like, "How are the kids?" And it's the two things, and they're sitting there like knitting or something.
Yeah,
and she's like, "They're not kids, they're angels." But yeah, students, they rarely face any consequences. I know for a fact. As I said, I wasn't great in school. There's no denying that. Academically, yes. Behaviourally, questionable.
That's a fair statement.
And there was no consequence. Like the worst that you get is a suspension, and it's like, okay, well, fun.
Mm.
But on that note, 1 in 23 students in 2023 were suspended at least once.
Wow. Okay.
So
Read that again for me, please. Sorry, that was
1 in 23 students got suspended at least one time in the year 2023. So we're talking like 5% of the population
yeah.
in school.
That's ridiculous.
It's a big number.
That's almost one classroom is always getting suspended.
Yeah, but it'd be nearly more than one in a classroom.
It's essentially yes.
In
You're
a
right.
public school, in a private school, they're normally a bit less people in them. And then if you move on to teacher safety, you got 55% of teachers reporting that they suffer from work-related stress or mental health issues in a 12-month period.
That's interesting.
So if you've got 55%, let's just call it more than half of the teachers
Mm-hmm.
in a position where they're mentally not coping,
Mm.
then they're the authority figure in the classroom,
And they're not coping with the classroom.
and they're not coping with the classroom, then what are the children doing?
They're also going to follow that role model in their
Yes,
footsteps, and they're not going to cope.
exactly. So it's a never-ending perpetual cycle of terrible, terrible outcomes,
Mm.
and it's getting worse and worse. Um, there is a slight exemption to that, like private schools enforce stricter codes of behaviour, and they do consistently outperform public schools in academic and wellbeing metrics, especially in terms of like behavioural issues. That is due to many things. It could be, for example, smaller classrooms, easy to control.
Right.
It could be due to parents paying a mozza for their children to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Some parents will pay upwards of 700 grand over their life for one student.
Wow, 700 grand.
From K to 12, yes.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's, so, year one might be like 16 grand,
Mm-hmm.
year two might be like 17, 18, 19, 20, and then by the late years, it's like 34, 40 grand
Right.
in some schools.
Yes.
So it builds up, and over that 12-year period, then you get to that 700 grand figure, give or take,
I follow.
at some schools. That's on the higher end. So if you're playing up there, your parents are not going to be happy.
No, definitely not.
And the teachers are not going to be happy. And each student is not going to be happy because they're going to be like getting asked by their parents, oh, what did you learn today? Or how was school today? Or whatever. Because they have an actual invested interest.
Correct.
And then the kids' parents that are getting told, oh, we didn't do much because Joe was playing up all day.
Mm.
They're going to be like, well, that's not on. I'm paying a mozza to be here. Between that classroom
Mm-hmm.
in that year,
Yep.
you've got over 250 grand being spent by parents accumulatively. So they're all going to blow up, contact the school, bang, discipline. He's gone.
Yep.
Like, that can't be happening.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's another interesting one.
That is a good contrast comparatively to public school systems.
Oh, big time. Because in public school, you got like what? I think we had like 32 in a class.
Yeah.
Give or take. Again, some classes were bigger than others. And the worst that you'd get there is they'd move you from one class to another.
What does that really do? That doesn't really help.
Okay, well, now I'm going to go distract this class.
Yeah. That is a terrible solution.
It is a terrible solution. But what is the right solution? There's got to be more discipline. And I think we need, again, probably more male role models in there.
Mm-hmm.
Increase the deficit of 75% female and 25% male. I don't know. What else do you think is a solution?
I would like to look at our neighbouring countries, like you were saying. Singapore have improved, or outperformed us, I should say, in a lot of academic areas. It'd be interesting to see what their sort of households are like, if they're anything similar or different to ours, just to get to the root of the cause. Because obviously, having a male in the household is a huge factor to a child's performance in education.
Yeah, so the education minister needs to get on that. Needs to start looking at other people's backyards before he looks at ours, and then sort it out. But another thing that's gone wrong, and I mean, if you're looking at the amount of time spent on things in school, it should be like, if you've got 10 million things to teach, how much time can you spend on one thing? Bugger all. If you've got 50 things to teach that are really important, you can spend a lot more time on it and get it done. So when you're introducing like gender ideology in classrooms as young as year one, then you're taking that time away from other things.
Which are critical to a child's growth.
Absolutely, especially when we can't read. 33% of us can't read in year 9.
That's outrageous. But we know whether or not we want to be a boy or a girl. Is that what I'm hearing?
Apparently.
Do we know the difference between a boy and a girl at year 9?
Apparently.
That's interesting. I would like to investigate that more as well.
I mean, better yet, in the curriculum, New South Wales, Victoria, and Queensland all include gender ideology.
Wow.
and they get exposed as early as year one.
That's insane. I don't think that makes
So
sense.
if I'm year one, how old are you? 6?
Yeah.
Yeah. So year one in Australia for the international listeners, you're 6 years old. At that point in time, if I'm getting explained to what a boy is or what a girl is, or that I could be a boy, I could be a girl, just even opening that sort of wormhole there, I'm instantly curious and confused
That's
because
a good
you
answer.
don't really have the capacity at that age to go, this is right, this is wrong, or I feel like this or I feel like that. Like I remember growing up, I thought that I was going to be a wizard.
Yeah.
I was like 7 years old. I'm running around and playing Yu-Gi-Oh, and I'm like, okay, I am the Dark Magician.
I was running around thinking I would be Spider-Man. I was
Yeah,
going to be a superhero one day.
yeah, exactly. So like, if that can of worms is open, it's like you can be what you want to be or whatever.
Why would they open the door to people so young?
It's a weird time to do it.
It's not the right time.
And then you've got to actually really question, why is it that age?
Mm,
What would the government get as a like positive to that?
that's a great question. How is that improving the
Anything.
education that child is receiving?
Well, even take the education out of it. What actual benefit does that have for anything in society at that age?
That is a great point.
Nothing.
That is a very good point.
Yeah. And I mean, I highly doubt that people know at that age what's going on.
No.
Um,
I can
and then,
remember being 6 and thinking, not even thinking, I just knew I had no idea what was going on. My brain was a sponge, and I was ready to absorb as much information as I could, and then use that to then grow up, which would make me the man that I am now.
exactly. And so that at that early age, getting something like that brought into your mind, it has to play an impact on what you become. It has to, because you're getting shaped. You don't know anything. Like if someone told me that I could actually develop superpowers by being bitten by a spider
Mm.
when I was 8 years old, I would have done it.
Yep.
Let alone 6.
Yeah.
Like I would have been like, "Oh, cool! It's a redback. Bang, done. I'm dead."
Yeah.
It's like,
Redback must be radioactive. Here come my
yeah,
superpowers.
that's the one I want. That's the
Yeah.
most powerful spider. I'll be the most powerful spider.
Yes.
Like, oh, so silly. Um, but this is having an impact on real life because if we go back to 2003, there was 10 referrals to the Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne, as in 10 being the maximum. There was fewer than 10, but we're rounding up to be generous.
Okay.
In 2003, fewer than 10 referrals for gender clinics in Melbourne.
Gender clinics being clinics that help.
Transition.
Okay.
Fast forward to 2021, and this is 21. This isn't even the last 4 years, which we've seen a dramatic increase. In fact, I'd probably assume that from 2003 to 2021 would be similar from 21 to 25 in terms of the overall number.
Okay.
820, 820 referrals in the Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne for gender clinics.
Wow.
So not just a hospital, a children's hospital
820.
in one city has had an 82 times.
How is that possible? When did that happen?
2003 to 21.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
But no, like, what?
When I don't understand how our education system. Oh, hang on. Sorry. I don't understand how the people of Australia have now accepted this ideology that children, if they listen to their children tell them that I know I look like a boy, but I'm really a girl, they're then going to accept that as truth.
Well, here's the interesting thing. In this time period, the parents haven't had to be notified.
Wait a minute. Okay.
So there was no. I think it might be in the curriculum now that they do need to notify parents. I'm not 100% sure on that because it's
Sure, that is the case.
you can't access it that late. But at that point in time, they didn't have to be notified.
How can that be allowed? That is their child. I don't understand. Surely that, like, if we were to look at a hierarchy of responsibility, the parents are the pinnacle of that child's responsibility or being responsible for that child.
Yeah, but also like I'm just thinking like children's hospital, children.
Yeah.
Like what? When you can't have sex until 16, or you can't provide consent because you don't know what you do and don't want.
Mm.
But I can change my whole life
Wow.
Well, a bigger decision for me is removing genitals, taking tablets to change my gender, than having sex with someone.
I'm actually now in disbelief that this is happening. Is this real?
This is real, yes. This is actually
Children
real.
are children transitioning at this age
This is fully true.
in Australia?
In Australia.
I don't believe it.
820 in Melbourne, at the
I'm-
Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne in 2021. Well, that's how many referrals they received.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
It doesn't necessarily mean all 820 went ahead,
That's a fair enough.
but I mean, if you're getting referred to that point,
The door's
like the
open.
door's been you're pretty well through the door.
That's fair.
But it's all getting taught before literacy. It's getting taught before puberty.
Before puberty, is
Before
it?
puberty.
That is not right. I think, if anything, the earliest I would accept at the door being opened is at puberty.
Maybe 16.
Yes.
If you can't drink until you're 18, why can you change your whole like livelihood?
Exactly.
If you can't have sex until 16, how can you change your whole livelihood before that?
There's no way we are giving children that.
You can't drive a car until 17 with supervision. But you can change your whole future of your life before that.
I'm shocked.
Like, who is enabling these decisions? You can't invest in shares until you're 18.
Mhm.
But you can go and change your whole livelihood
These
before
comparisons
that.
are outrageous.
I know. Like, what else is age-based? You're not a responsible adult until you're 25. Your frontal lobe as a male hasn't developed until you're 25. You technically, in court, can still get away with certain things because your frontal lobe's not developed until 25.
Wow, that is interesting.
Pre-18, you can get away with a lot more in court because you're not developed as well. Up until about 14, you pretty much can't even be prosecuted because you don't have the capacity to understand right and wrong and make that decision.
Yeah.
This is Australian law.
Fair enough. Yeah.
But pre-14, you can go ahead and make these changes.
No, I don't. I don't believe it. I know you've got it right in front of us, and you're saying, "Look, it's right there."
Absurd.
Yeah.
Outrageous. Shouldn't exist, but it does.
And surely people are open to accept that. I mean, if everyone's seemingly willing to accept that children are going to decide whether they're boy or girl, surely we can let them decide when they're actually man and woman, right?
Yeah.
Why? Why is it necessary to be so forthcoming about this to children? Let them learn their ABCs. Let them learn how to read and write.
Yeah, let them learn to count to 100.
Exactly, please.
Like, it's just...
Those are the credentials that we need in our education system, so that then they can then go on to grow up and have a foundation where, sure, if you want to go down that avenue, you can, but you at least know how to read and write by year 9.
Yeah, but it's actually... I'm fully baffled. I've been trying to think ever since the start of this podcast. It's been 30 minutes, 40 nearly. And I've been sitting here thinking about this one point. What could be a benefit of introducing that to children? And I can't think of one.
I have no idea. I mean, are they going to go down the avenue of like the biology of things when they're just 6 and 10 years old?
I don't know. I don't even think
they go down the hormonal route. Do they explain to the children the hormones that they're taking?
The children wouldn't even understand it.
Why would they?
In year 5, you're getting taught. Actually, it might have been year 4. Like, you're getting taught that girls can get periods and stuff, and they've got to, you might wear a tampon or a pad or something, and that's completely normal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, whoa, really?
Yeah.
You don't even know what's going on. You're just told this can happen.
Exactly.
And you're like, whoa. So, like, if you're getting taught about periods in year 5 or 4 or whatever, and boners in year 5 and 6 as a male, I remember that. And they had like a diagram up, and it was a penis, and it went pointy or something. Yes. And I was like, oh wow.
I must remember that.
But like, how do you go from that happening and that's still in place to before that allowing them further like hormonal action and stuff? You don't know anything.
I think we can agree that that's absurd, surely.
Yeah, let's agree. This episode has gone for much longer than anticipated. So I'm going to break it up here. We're going to split it into 2 parts and spread it out. That way you can listen to it over multiple times instead of sitting there and listening to an hour and a half straight, as I understand that may be difficult. So we're wrapping it up here. The next episode will be published pretty quick. Just doing that now. Catch you soon. Dale. As always, we hope you enjoyed the episode, and if you did, you know exactly what needs to be done.
Hit that follow button, subscribe, share it to friends, family, or even your co-workers, as sharing this podcast helps not just us, but everyone in the world to learn about their finances.
Thank you, Dale.